Welcome to another session, or I would say almost the last session of the finance and accounting part of the financial forensics. Next lecture on, you would be more on the forensic part of it, that is more on the analytics side. Now, what we tried to do was we tried to help you understand the basic financial statements out there. That is what I did in accounting. And when we say finance, what is the basic function of finance? That's all. I am not even getting into the dwelling deep into all this. I mean, somebody can say, oh, there are derivative instruments, etc., etc., etc. We are not even getting into all that. We are not even getting into valuation of stock, valuation of firm, none of it. I talked only about the basic. That is, what did we look at? How do we evaluate a project? That is what we did in the last class. And today we will talk about the sourcing funds for the project out there. That's all. The typical risk return relationship is what I am trying to give you out, and certainly not beyond that. Now, I did tell you that when we talk about capital, there could be what is called as, when we talk about capital, there could be two kinds of capital. One is what is called as a equity capital, another is what is called as a debt kind of capital. Here when I say capital, I mean the sources of funds for you. I specifically mean the source of funds for you. Now, what is the objective of every company? Now, the objective of every company is to keep the cost of the capital or the cost of source of funds at the lowest possible. Now, what do you mean by cost of fund? Does equity have a cost? Yes, equity also has a cost. Does debt have a cost? Yes, debt also has a cost. The cost of debt is measured, what do you call it? The cost of debt, when we say the cost of debt is measured as the cost of my borrowing or cost of borrowing. You borrowed 8% interest, that 8% interest is the cost of the borrowing, so that becomes the cost of the debt. It can be floating, yes, it can be floating. Can it be 10%? Yes, it can be 10%. Can it be 12? Yes, it can be. Depends on the source of fund. When we say debt, debt means any kind of borrowing. So, where do I borrow? I can borrow from a bank, as I have told you in one of the earlier classes. I can borrow from a financial institution. I can borrow from a foreign financial institution. I can borrow basically from what is called as general public in the form of debentures, etc., etc. The list is endless out. And each of these will have a cost of borrowing, and that is what we call it as the cost of borrowing. Will the cost of borrowing vary with the source of fund? Yes, the cost of borrowing will vary with the kind of the cost of borrowing will vary with various factors. Will vary, if I have to put it in a very nutshell, or if I have to put it in very simple terms, the cost of borrowing will vary with the risk factors associated with the borrowing. What do you mean by risk factors? Imagine I borrow money for investing in a project. Now, how will I return the money to the fellow from whom I have borrowed? The project A in which I have invested has to give me the return, and that return will be used for returning the funds to the person from whom I have borrowed. What is a mortgage? Maybe the project A could be a mortgage, whatever it is. If the project A is risky, if I may not, the probability of me not getting money from the project is very, very high, then the cost of borrowing for investing in that project will also be very high. That is what I meant by the risk factors. It depends, the cost will depend on the risk factors, the purpose for which you have borrowed. So, the risk, that is what we call it as risk return relationship out there. Higher risk, higher the expected return. I use the word expected, not guaranteed higher return. It says higher the expected return. So I am investing, now I will say I have 3 projects out there and each project has a different risk profile. Now I go out to borrow. The person who is providing the funds will tell me in which project, will ask me in which project you are investing, and the risk characteristics will basically depend on that, or the cost of borrowing will depend on the project in which you are basically investing out there. So that cost of borrowing can vary. Yes, the cost of borrowing can vary. Now I will go to the cost of equity. When I say equity, equity also has a cost. How do you measure is there a cost of borrowing? No, there is no cost of borrowing per se. You are not borrowing there. What is the cost of equity? Cost of equity is nothing but expected return on the investment by equity holders. Expected return on the investment by the set of equity holders becomes the cost of equity. When we say cost of equity, expected return, what is the expected return? Is it in the form of dividend? It is basically what happens. The expected return will be in the form of dividends plus capital gain. What is that capital gain? Let us take a very simple example. I buy an equity share at 100 rupees per share. End of the year, I am selling the equity share at 120 rupees in the market. What is my gain? My capital gain is 20 rupees out there. That is, I gain 20 rupees on the capital that I have invested. That is what we call it as capital gain. So, during the period of 1 year, if I have earned a 8%, if I have earned a 100% dividend on that investment, that face value of the share is 100 rupees, 10 rupees, market value is 100 rupees. I have bought it at market value and I have sold it 1 year later at 120, and during the period of 1 year, the company has given me a dividend of 100% of the face value. When I say dividend, dividend is always as a percentage of the face value of the share. So they have given 100% dividend. That means what is my total gain? My total gain is 30 rupees, 20 rupees in the form of capital gain plus 10 rupees in the form of what is called as dividend. I have gained about 30 rupees on the kind of investment what I have made out there. So when we say expected return, that is how basically you are looking. These two put together will constitute what is called as the return. These two constitute what is called as the return. What is the expected return? The expected return comes in this particular case out there basically based on proxy. When I say what is proxy, now I can invest that money in a particular company's equity, or I can invest that money in an equally risky debt instrument out there. When I say debt instrument, for example, a debenture, a bond, these are all debt instrument, and investing in the company's equity is very less risky. So I can compare it to a bond or a debenture. Or I can take another example. I invest in equity share of a company. There are particular risk characteristics. I don't invest in that company. I can invest in another, what do you call it as, company B out there. Company B has been an established company over a period of last 10 years. I can invest in the equity shares of company B instead of company A, which is new. And historically I see company B has been giving a return of 10% on the investment. Historically, 10% return means dividend plus capital gain put together. Now, what is my expected return for project A? My expected return for project A will be almost the same as what I am looking for, or what I am getting for an alternative instrument. The alternative there is project A or project B. Project B is new, project A is very old. but assume both have the same risk characteristics. Normally one can argue, sir, if it is a new project it will have high risk. Let us make it very simple. Assume both have the same risk characteristics. I am comparing. So what is my expected return of investing in project A? My expected return of investing in project A is the same 10% which I would have got had I invested in project B. So that is why I used a proxy out there. I use the word proxy. So what do you say? You say I look at other comparables. Comparable investment equally risky options out there. So what do? We say comparable equally risky investment options. We take that as our possible expected return out there. Now this is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, I will look at it with the help of calculating my expected return based on what is called as the risk profile. There what do? I look at a comparable risk profile. And use that as a look at comparable risk profile and use that risk, use that risk profile for calculating my expected return, out there. So that becomes what is called as return. So this risk, how is risk measured? When we talk about risk, how is risk measured? Risk is always measured with the help of what is called as beta. Now what is this beta? Now beta, if I have to put it very theoretically, I can say it is nothing but what do you call it as a measure of volatility of a security or a portfolio, in relation to the market. Normally let us look at it. Let me explain it in even more simpler terms. What do you mean by relation to the market? Let us say market. When I say market, let me say index. Whatever, NSE 50, BSE 30, whatever you want, you can take the index out there. I take an index, BSE 30, NSE 50, whatever you want, you can take the index. Normally, what is that? I have a particular stock. Let us say stock A. Now, the stock means the share of company A out there. Now, my point is, how does this stock A move in relation to the index? How does this stock A move in relation to the index? That is all what we say. Now, if the stock is more volatile in relation to the index, then what happens? It will have a higher beta more than 1. If the stock is less volatile as compared to the index, then it is expected to have a beta less than 1. Now what is that 1 got to do? Normally the beta of the index is considered as equal to 1 out there. Beta of the index is, that is the risk of investing in the index is exactly equal to 1. That is how basically we sort of look at it. That is, what are we looking at? That is, it measures the stock A's volatility in the prices in relation to the index. Let us say, now let me talk about. I have a stock A. My stock A has a beta of 1.2. Now what does it mean? It means that my market volatility is 1. This stock has a volatility of 1.2. That means this stock is considered to be, stock or portfolio is considered to be highly more volatile than the market. If it is more volatile than the market, that is, if it is higher than 1, then the risk is higher than the market. because beta is always a relative value. It is what is called as a measure of volatility of a security or a portfolio, whichever you want to consider, in relation to the market out there, in relation to the market. That's all what we are looking. Now I have what is called as a bond B. It has a beta of 0.25. That means it is less volatile compared to market, or I would say it is less risky compared to market out there. Less risky compared to market. Now what do we do? How do we calculate this beta? How do we calculate this beta coefficient? Beta is equal to covariance of the market relative to the basically the stock out there. Covariance of the stock related to the market out there. Covariance of the stock related to the market by variance of the market out there. Now what is this RM, RE, etc. Sir, you have written. RE is nothing but basically return of the instrument or stock out there, or stock or instrument that you are trying to find the risk, trying to find the beta for. RM is nothing but return of the market. What is this return? Return is nothing but, for example, what is the return? If I say yesterday the market was 100, today the market has moved to 120. What is my return? My return is 120 minus 100 divided by 100 is basically what I would call it as the return out there. This is what we call it as the return. So what are we doing out here? Am I right? It is simple. I have to be right. Now, what am I trying to do here? I have calculated the return of the particular stock or the portfolio or the instrument that you are trying to look at. That is what is called as RE. I have looked at the covariance of that stock with the return of the market out there. Now return of the stock was priced at 60 yesterday, today it is priced at 75 or 66 or 75, whatever out there. Now I say there is a 15 rupee difference, that is the return of the stock out there. Now there is a return of the market. Now I see the covariance between the return of the market and the return of the stock divided by the variance of the market, only the variance of the market. Do you know how to calculate variance? You know how to calculate covariance, etc. You can calculate. That will give me the risk or the beta coefficient of the instrument in question, of the stock what I am measuring or instrument, of the stock or of the instrument out there. So we use beta. Now what did I say out here in this particular case out here? I said that we number one use proxy, or number two we use a comparable risk profile and find out the expected return. We use a comparable risk profile and calculate the expected return. Now I have got the what do you call it as risk profile. I can calculate the risk profile, I can compare the risk profile out here. I don't even look at comparison. Independently I have calculated the risk profile. Now once I have the risk profile, I will have to calculate what is my expected return of the stock out there, of the stock. Now what do we do? There is something called as, what do you call it as, or what do you call it as expected return. What do you call it as expected return out there in this particular case out here, expected return. Expected return is nothing but there is something called as RF. What is this RF? I will talk about it. This is what into RM minus RF. I will let you know, tell you what is this. Sir, you wrote all the alphabets and some beta something, we didn't understand anything. Don't worry. This is what we call it as the risk-free rate. Now, what is this risk-free rate? Risk-free rate is the return that I will get by investing in a government bond, that is in an instrument which is risk-free. Investing in a government bond is risk-free. The return what you get is normally equal to or around what you call it as the inflation out there. So, there is no compensation of the risk that you are getting. You are getting a return which is but should be almost equal to what is called as your inflation, etc. So, there is no compensation, it is a risk-free rate, there is no risk, I invest the money, I have to get some return to compensate for the price movement out there, and that is what we call it as the risk-free rate. Now, what I am taking this? I am taking this because I need to know how much more than this that I should get because of investing in a particular project which is more which has a risk profile. For example, when I say RF, that is investing in a government bond, risk is 0, beta is 0. Risk is 0, beta is 0. Now, I don't invest in a government bond, I invest in a State Bank of India fixed deposit. My State Bank of India fixed deposit will have to give me a slightly higher return than the risk-free rate, than the government treasury bill. Why? Because the risk profile is, though it is government bond, risk profile slightly changes, marginally increases as compared to the government bond. So, what happens? To compensate for that risk, a slight increase in risk, the return what you get in a State Bank of India fixed deposit will be marginally higher than the treasury bill out there or the risk-free rate out there. I don't invest in State Bank of India fixed deposit, I go to a private company, say Bajaj Finance, and invest in a 1-year fixed deposit out there. Then my return what I am going to get is far higher, about 7% or 8% is the kind of return I am going to get there, because what happens? The risk profile increases, there is no government, there is no guarantee, etc., etc., etc. out there. So, risk profile increases, my return also increases out there. Return will have to be higher as compared to the risk, as compared to my risk-free rate. My risk-free rate, let us say, assume is 5% out there of investing in a government bond. If I invest in Bajaj Finance, I get 8%. That 3% extra I am getting is for compensation for the risk that I am taking for investing in Bajaj Finance as compared to a government bond. I don't know how much interest Bajaj Finance gives, I just took an example of the cup out there. Instead of Bajaj Finance, you can look at Shriram Finance, anything out there, or Sundaram Finance, or any of these. So, what happens? Now, I don't invest in the Bajaj Finance or Sundaram Finance or any of these, I will go and invest in what is called as a mutual fund. Then what is happening? My risk profile is further increasing, so my expected return is further increasing as compared to my risk-free rate. I don't invest in a mutual fund, I directly go and buy stocks out there in the market. My risk profile is even higher, so what happens? My expected return will keep going up in the process out there. Now, how do we measure the risk? That risk is what we measure it by using the alphabet, that is basically we call it as beta here. So, what is it? What am I trying to do? Minimum I have to get the risk-free rate. Minimum I have to get the risk-free rate, because risk-free rate is what government is giving me. Now, what is this RM minus RF? This is what we call it normally as the market premium. What is this market premium? That is, I said the index of beta of an index is 1. Now, I want to know what is my market return. That is, if I invest in exactly the index today and 1 year down the line I exit, what is the return that I am getting investing in the index is what we call it as the market return. I invest in the index today and exactly 1 year later I get out and invest in something, I get out of that investment, that return what I will get is what I call it as the market return out there. Now that market return is higher by how much as compared to the risk free rate, that is why we call it as market premium. That is what is the percentage of return that the market is giving higher than the risk free rate. What is the premium that the market is giving higher than the risk free rate, that is what we call it as the market premium. Now I said it's a, now I say I want to find the expected return of stock A. Now I have calculated the beta of stock A. How did I calculate the beta of stock A? I use the covariance of the return of the stock A in relation to the market divided by the variance of the market. I got what is my beta. That is, what did I do? I checked the volatility of stock A in relation to the market. That is all what I have done. I have checked the volatility of the stock A in relation to the market, and that gives me the volatility figure, that is how volatile is the stock as compared to the market. If it is more volatile than the market, beta is higher than 1. If it is less volatile than the market, beta is less than 1. Now what did I do out here? I multiply this beta with the market premium. Supposing I say beta of a particular investment is 1.5, of a particular stock A of the stock A is 1.5. That means what? Investing in that stock A is higher risky than investing in the index. When investing in that stock is riskier than investing in the index, then what should I get? I should get a return, expecting return. My expectation of the return will obviously be higher than the return, market return. I repeat, I will repeat out there. Now assume that investing in stock A, my beta is 1.5. That means what? The volatility or the risk profile of the stock A is higher than the risk profile of the market. If the risk profile of the stock A is higher than the risk profile of the market, then my expected return will not be equal to the market return, will obviously be higher than the market return. Why? Because I have taken higher risk. Expected return will be higher than the market risk. Why? Because I have taken a higher risk out there. So what did I do? Whatever is the market premium that I have got, I multiply with the beta of the stock. I multiply with the beta of that particular stock out there. That beta of the stock is 1.5. That means my expected return is going to be higher than the market. 1.5 into the risk market premium. My beta of the stock is less than 1, then obviously because I am investing in a less risky instrument, my return will have to be lower than the market. My expected return will have to be lower than the market. So basically that is what happens. And this is what we call it as in finance, we call it as CAPM, or we call it as capital asset pricing model.